Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining the Buffalo Built podcast. I'm very excited to talk to Chris Siano here for the Buffalo Built podcast. You have a really interesting story. You're kind of the Grant Street first mover in Buffalo. So I'd love to hear that story. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. Thank you for coming on.
No problem.
So Chris, tell me how you got started. How did you start getting into development? Where did you start and
Sure.
how that progressed?
My background is in architecture. So I went to UB and did my undergraduate and graduate in the architecture department. Bought a house right out of graduate school back when you could buy a house for the same price as a car in the city of Buffalo, which is why I stayed, because I'm from the New York metro area. So I just, the cost difference between housing was incredible, and I wanted to do hands-on stuff. So bought a house on Johnson Park and worked on that house for a few years. And while I was working on that house, my brother, who is an attorney, I was telling him about the real estate market in Buffalo. And we decided we wanted to get into real estate development together. So after I sold that house, we started HES Properties, which is our real estate development company. And we began looking around for a site in the city of Buffalo. And we looked at a number of properties. I remember we looked at Linwood. There was a multi-unit on Linwood. I showed him Grant Street. He came up to Buffalo. We looked at 3 or 4 different properties at the time. And he liked the building on Grant Street, which was 368 Grant Street, which is a 3-unit that was vacant at the time. So it used to be the Martino's Appliance building.
Okay.
It had been vacant for over a decade. Substantial structural issues, nearly caving in. So we bought that building, and that, like I say, it was a 3-unit, 6,000 square foot building. We gutted it and then brought our architect on. We kept it a 3-unit, which in hindsight I probably would have done more, but you learn as you go. So it has a commercial space on the first floor, residential on the second, residential on the third. 3-bedroom on each floor. So at the time we kept it a 3-unit on each, a 3-unit because we were, I would say, intimidated by the prospect of a sprinkler system. So basically, if we kept it a 3-unit, we didn't have to do that because it was grandfathered in.
Right.
So while we were working on that building, there was a vacant parcel across the street that was city-owned. Used to be the Ellen Terry Theater, which looked a lot. It was a near identical theater to the one that's on Allen Street, Theater of Youth. Yep. Beautiful building, but it got torn down. So by the time we were on the block, it was already a vacant lot. And we were looking for what was going to be the next project. And when we found out it was city-owned, we approached the city. And I would say it was a mixed bag dealing with the city in the sense that it takes a while to find out who you need to talk to.
Yep.
But the upside is if they elect to sell to you, they're selling to you for the appraised value. So you're getting it at a reasonable price if they're willing to sell it to you. And so in order for them to sell to us, they wanted to see capital, they wanted to see a plan. So we came to them with a plan, and we had funds. So they sold us the property, and we immediately began designing for the parcel. And then while we were in the middle of that process, the Better Buffalo Fund came into existence. So in the initial round of the Better Buffalo, we applied, and I want to say we were one of the initial 30. Only applicant to be approved who was not a Cuomo donor. I'll say that as well. But we got approved for 20% financing through the Better Buffalo Fund. In the end, we didn't end up taking that money because during all the process it was a reimbursement situation, and then during construction was when the bid rigging for the Tesla plant happened. So the state came back to us with a whole bunch of additional documents to indemnify them and protect them. And my brother's the attorney, he reads every document, and he's looking at the documents and saying that we can't sign these documents.
So the Better Buffalo Fund, that was a loan at a very low interest rate.
It was a loan at, yes, it was like, I want to say 3.5%, 4%.
Right.
At a, fixed, no balloon payment over, I don't remember the term, 20 years or something like that. So it was good. We were approved for $440,000, which was 20% of the construction cost at the time. And then basically after the Tesla issue, they came back to us and said, well, you have to, sign all these documents. And my brother's reading them and saying, these are not forms we can sign.
And the idea was you had financing for the other 80%.
Correct.
So it was going to be little money out of your pocket if everything kind of went as planned.
Correct.
But instead, the docs weren't good. Lawyer, brother said, absolutely not, we can't sign these docs. So you move forward with the project doing your own money.
Correct. So we finished that building, and that's a 13-unit building. That was new construction. That was our first new building. And it went well. And, in hindsight, even the loans through the banks at the time were not terrible loans.
Correct.
But I will say we learned that there aren't a lot of great financial products for, I would say, the $1 to $4 million range from the banks. I think a lot of banks for commercial financing want to do a $10 or $20 million project. If it's new construction, they don't really have a great option for a $1 million to $4 million situation.
And so for new construction, why don't they have a good product? So, I assume it's construction draws, you put equity up front.
I think it's probably just as much work for a bank to do a $20 million loan as a $1 million loan. I think new construction is risky.
Yep.
So I think that we're an anomaly in the sense that many of the developers who are able to do new construction can work at a larger scale maybe, where we're bigger than a small developer, but we're smaller than a big developer.
That makes perfect sense.
So it feels like there isn't a great product. So you're going to borrow $1 million and pay $50,000 in closing costs on top of the interest rate that's variable and going to change after 5 years. And you're paying on every draw, and you're paying their inspectors and all of this stuff. We did it, and we learned from it, but we didn't come away from it feeling like we got great service.
And your thought process is if you're going to do ground up, you need to go bigger. So doing a 13 unit at, what was that, a $4 million project?
At the time, it was a $2.5 million
$2.5 million project?
Yeah, we were able to, I think our hard cost on that one was $180 a square foot.
Okay.
So I guess we took a different lesson, which is not to go to the banks at all. So we did the next project without bank financing at all. I think we could have elected to go bigger, or we could have did what we did and essentially done cash only and avoided the banks.
Right. So banks are always tough to work with. I get that.
Yes.
Especially with the fees, they're going to fee you to death.
Yes.
So your next project, you're saying, okay, we want to not use bank financing.
Correct.
Using your own money or your fundraising money for that?
Our own money. So it was all cash. We had a design. So while we were working on that building, we were looking at, okay, what else does the city own? They owned 2 more adjacent parcels, 3 doors up, 386 Grant Street. So we approached the city again and said, can we buy this parcel? Again, they want to see proof of funds. They want to see a plan. They're not going to sell if you're trying to make a parking lot. They want a building. Yeah. So at that point, I think we had built maybe enough goodwill with the city that they saw us as a reliable partner, and they sold us that parcel, and we had a plan in mind for a 10-unit. COVID hits, we take a break thinking, okay, we're going to ride this out. The construction costs don't never go down, they only go up. So we basically decide, okay, we have to go back to the drawing board because we want to do this with cash, and all of a sudden everything is twice as expensive as it used to be. So we redesigned from a 10-unit to a 6-unit, stayed with a cash deal, and built 386 Grant Street, which I want to say has been about a year now. It's been operating. And so that was an all-cash building, again, 6 units.
And that has commercial downstairs too, right?
It
2
does.
Units downstairs, and then
yes,
2 on the second floor, 2 on the third
correct.
floor?
Correct. So any of these new builds, under the green code, you have to have, on Grant Street, because it's a commercial thoroughfare, you have to have ground level commercial space. And in order to not do an elevator, you have to have an ADA apartment.
Correct.
So
you do that on the first floor as well.
Correct. In the back is what we did on that one. So both new buildings have ground level commercial in front.
Got it.
And the larger one has 2 ground level commercial spaces, but they both have an ADA accessible apartment in the back.
Right, which is required.
Yes,
Got
for
it.
no elevator.
Right.
And
Right.
on 386, we did a single stair as well. So we're trying to reduce the common area, costs like elevators, stairwells, wasted space, things like that.
Yeah, elevators are tough to justify, especially on a smaller project.
Correct.
Because you're paying a lot of money that you get to essentially make more rent for, and it's very difficult to do that. Now, are you doing parking for everyone on both those projects? Was there enough parking there, or was it going to be purely street parking or a combination?
On the first new construction, we only did 4 parking spaces. And I would say we learned that it's not required by code.
Right.
But if you're trying to, how could I say this? If you're trying to get market rate, you need to have a parking spot.
Right.
You need to have a washer dryer in every unit. These are things we learned on the first one. So in the first building, we did a laundry room, and we rented the parking spots a la carte to the people who wanted to pay it. But I wouldn't say we had trouble renting them, but I would say the expectation on a market rate new construction is that they're getting 1 parking spot each. So on end, we looked at doing parking underneath, but you're essentially building a fireproof box that you can then put the apartments on top of. So now you're paying for a lot more steel, a lot more fireproofing. Again, on a smaller building, you're trying to do as much wood frame construction as you can. So we basically were able to do the 6 unit and still have 6 spots in the back.
Oh, you were able to on the second.
On the second new, 386, the one we just completed, we were able to fit 6 spots in the back.
That's perfect. And when you did parking for 6, did you still have to do drainage and all that stuff, or was it because it's...
Oh, yes.
You still did?
On site, yep. Absolutely.
And so it gets costly.
It does. We also, you wouldn't know it by looking at the property, but we graded the property level because there is quite a bit of fill and slope. So a lot of these older parcels, particularly on this lot that was vacant, the city used to just demo buildings, drop it in the hole, and fill over the top. So the grade went up 24 inches from the front to the back. So one of the things we learned on this project was the cost associated with grading, because now you have retaining walls on all 3 sides. So, that was a lesson I learned on every one of them. But on this one, I learned you're probably better off just sloping your driveway and you're having your lot up higher in the back, because then you wouldn't have to have retaining walls.
That makes sense. Oh, yeah, right, with the retaining walls. And then what was the next after that?
Those are our 3. So we have 3 buildings with 22 units over 3 buildings.
All on Grant Street, right?
All on Grant Street.
Now, the very first one you did, it was a 3 unit, kept it a 3 unit. You're saying what you know now, you would have done something different.
Correct.
What would that be?
Well, those apartments are 3-bedroom apartments. It's very difficult to rent 3 beds. It's just a pain in the neck, because you're either going to have, if you have 3 roommates, there's always 1 roommate on the outs, there's more turnover. I would have split that floor into 2 apartments. I would have had 2 1-bedrooms on the second floor, 2 1-bedrooms on the third floor. You're also, if you're doing either it's a gut rehab or a new construction with a 3-bedroom, you're competing against Buffalo doubles. And there's a lot of 3-bedrooms on the market. Whereas if you are doing a new construction 1-bedroom, that's a very specific renter. They don't want existing buildings, they want a new building, they want the modern layouts, they want all of that. So most of my tenants are late 20s, early 30s, young professionals. They might be from Buffalo but moved away, they're coming back. They're not intimidated by the cost of a market rate apartment, but they want the same type of unit they could get in another city.
That makes perfect sense. And would you say your price per square foot of rent is also lower for a 3-bedroom than it would be for the 1-bedrooms?
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, that's a big thing too. Your construction cost goes up a little bit.
Yes.
Your kitchen's a bathroom and a plumbing, but your price per square foot of rental must by far outweigh that.
Correct. Exactly. And so that's a one-time cost to put in another kitchen and bathroom. And yes, you're doing a sprinkler, but you can actually do. They have these residential systems on the 2nd and 3rd floor, so the commercial still has to be hard piped, but the 2nd and 3rd floor now I know is all PEX for the sprinkler system. And you are paying also with the sprinkler system, there's an ongoing cost associated with the second water line into the building, but it's nominal compared to the additional rent that you pay.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah. And so I want to kind of dive in by buying from city lots. So I think a lot of people that we talk to, they don't typically buy from the city. and you're dealing a lot with city code, which there's some uniqueness there that I think I want to unfold a little bit. Can you talk about the process? What is the process to buy a lot from the city?
That's a great question, and it was a difficult one to answer. I would say that there's a formal process and then there's an informal process. It's the best way I can describe it. I'd say the formal process involves approaching the real estate office, asking about a parcel that you know is city-owned and asking to purchase it. The informal process is developing a relationship with the city itself. So by that I mean a relationship with your council member.
Yeah.
You are not going to buy a parcel in your council member's district that they don't approve of. Right. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think they want to know who the actors are. They're looking to, infill is difficult. They want buildings. They don't want parking lots. They don't want demolition. So they need to know that you are a reliable actor, that you have the funds and the experience to actually be able to execute a new building. So there are very few people who can do that. I would say, I don't think if we had not already done 368, the rehab of Martino's, I don't know that we would have had the political capital that the city would have necessarily wanted to sell to us. That's just the truth of it. I don't know with the new administration whether that is different, but
I don't think it is. So you dealt with Councilman Rivera.
Correct.
Right. He's generally pretty pro real estate, so he was an advocate for you.
I would say yes, absolutely. He was an advocate for us. Yes.
Got it. So once you maintain or get ownership of that vacant lot, you already submitted plans. What you plan to do, those could change.
Ours didn't dramatically change. I would say, I come at it from an architecture background, and I would say many developers don't have a background in architecture, or if there is an architect on the team, they may not be the primary voice in the process. But because I have a background in architecture and I'm the guy on the ground making a lot of the decisions, I came in with a pretty clear sense of what I was trying to do. Now, we still have to do site analysis. So when you're doing a new building and you go to a competent architect, the first thing they're going to do is basically take some time to analyze the code and tell you how many units you can do on the site, so on and so forth. Now, at the time we were doing 363, the green code had not been passed yet. So we knew that there was a preliminary green code and there was the existing building code. And the existing building code allowed far less units on the parcel than the green code did, because the former building zoning code basically had a calculation based on how many square foot the lot was, how many units you wanted to put in, then how many parking spaces per unit you wanted to put in.
And you were required to have parking spaces with the old code.
Correct. For every unit, there was a certain number. I think, let's say there was X number for residential, and then there was a per square foot for the commercial. So on small parcels, essentially your entire lot was going to be parking.
That's right.
So what we did with our architect, who was John Wingfelder, was we looked at the green code and said, okay, this is the code the city itself is trying to pass. Let's design a building for that code, and then go to the city and ask for variances to build that building. And he was straightforward with us, our architect, to say, this has not been passed yet, you're not guaranteed anything. We could design a building, the city says they won't build it. But my feeling was, if the city is proposing this is what they want. Yeah. Let's go to them with what they want and see if they'll do it. And so we needed, I want to say, 4 or 5 variances based on density and a number of other issues related to the difference between the two codes. And we went before, after we came up with a design. So after you do your site analysis, you will do a schematic design, and then you go before the zoning board and the planning board with your schematic design. So we went to them with that schematic, which was actually 12 units because we hadn't subdivided the commercial space yet. But it was essentially the same building. We just subdivided the commercial once we got our tenants. But we went to them with a 12-unit design that the zoning and planning approved, and then we began our construction documents. And so that's when you basically finish up your construction drawings, then you get your building permit, you submit that for a building permit, and then you can begin construction.
So, and you put that design, I mean, I've seen these buildings, they're very good looking.
Thank you.
Very well designed. How critical was the court of public opinion when you're throwing these designs out there? I know whenever I see it, I've been to these meetings and I hear some of these neighbors have concerns. I'm like, this is a great looking, you're looking at a vacant lot. This is a phenomenal looking building, but they sometimes are a little critical or too critical, I think. How is dealing with that aspect of it?
Well, we were on Grant, not on Elmwood. So I would say the community, when we did 363, was much more receptive, and 368, much more receptive to investment than maybe we might have received on Elmwood Avenue. But I'm not even sure we wouldn't have been able to overcome the issue on Elmwood Avenue. Even as a developer, I take a sort of a middle of the road approach here, view on all of this, which is that I think many developers do a poor job of outreach and have a poor understanding of design. I also think there are many people in the community who don't have an understanding of the economic reality of development. So you have a developer coming in sometimes with a design that isn't a great design and hasn't taken the time to speak to the neighbors and understand their concerns. And then you have community members who think they're experts on design just because they're part of a Facebook group.
That's right.
And so I think everybody needs to kind of meet in the middle here a little bit. I think developers need to do a better job being sensitive to design issues, speaking to community members, and I think community members have to understand developers are not running non-for-profit charities. You cannot get private investors to invest millions of dollars in our community to lose money.
Right.
People have to make money if they're going to put capital up. That's a reality. And every investor has to weigh whether they're going to put their money in Buffalo real estate or the equities market or in bonds or in something else. And I can tell you that every investor who's investing in real estate is making a lower return on that real estate than they are on equities. Now, that doesn't mean they're not doing it for other reasons, depreciation, diversification, all sorts of things. But the notion that developers in Western New York are making a lot of money on their developments is not a reality. It's just not. It's a lower rate of return. It's a much longer time horizon. And there's a lot more risk. You know, you put your money in Vanguard Mutual Fund, you're not going to lose your shirt in the way that you could in the middle of the construction of a new building.
Yes.
So, and I mean, we can even see in Western New York, there's a lot of examples of much bigger developers, quote unquote experienced developers, who don't seem to know what they're getting involved in when they start these projects. It shocks me.
Yeah, but they stall out.
Absolutely. I think outside investors who come in and don't understand this market really get beaten up. And I think that the developers who have been here for a longer time and understand the market do much better. And, you know, even going from 363 to 386 Grant Street, the construction costs doubled. The per square foot hard cost doubled from in 7 years from one building to another.
From 180 was the first one, or
180, and then we were up, not quite, it was 320 in hard costs per square foot.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes. So hard decisions have to get made. And I don't have all the answers, but some value engineering has to go into these buildings. There are certain things I try to maintain in my buildings, and I think that maybe we're not the best developers in that we put a lot of money into the construction. But my feeling is some of these costs are investments. So if I do brick on the first floor, I am putting in that cost, but that's going to pay off over the long term. It's just a more durable material. Exactly. It's a more aesthetically pleasing material. And if I'm trying to get market rate, I have to provide a product that is quality. And my attitude on Grant Street was, I am not going to produce a building of lesser quality on Grant Street than what would be produced on Elmwood Avenue. Because my vision for Grant Street is that it is just as good as Elmwood Avenue. But if I'm going to produce, you know, a poor quality building, I'm already saying to you, this block is not as good as other blocks. But then I'm going to ask you for the same amount of rent. That would be crazy.
That's right. No, that's really good. And I think the other part you talk about products. So I had this conversation with someone else about brick, right? So brick is more cost expensive, but if you take that out over 30 years, it's really nominal because the upkeep of even having to repaint it or having to do repairs really is minimal, if anything, and obviously it looks more beautiful. So really you win in the long run. So it is more expensive on the per square foot and all those things, but in the long run you do win. And it's an investment, right? It's not a, I want to make money today. It's an investment property, meaning for the future.
Yes, and we're buy and hold. And we're not trying to buy up a bunch of parcels and wait for other people to make investments and flip properties. You know, we bought one vacant building and 2 vacant parcels. We built on them as densely as we could, and we're holding them for as long as we possibly can.
And so 386, so walk me through this deal a little bit more. So, you know, we talked about buying the parcel from there. You submitted your plans, you made some changes, and had to make too many. Talk about the construction. So how'd the construction go for that project?
This is the most recent one.
The most recent one, yep.
It was a mixed bag. We had some issues. You know, I think there were still residual COVID issues.
This is during COVID or right where we're coming out?
It was after COVID. Okay. You know, when did COVID end exactly? But I would say it was things were getting better. We were not masked or anything like that, but there were still the costs were still up.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, the simplicity can be your friend with a lot of these projects. So, you know, there's a limit to the level of complexity you want to have in your building, because the more complexity, the more cost, you know, the more expensive things can get.
And you're right, and yours are not boxes. There's a lot of edges, a lot of turns with it,
sure,
which are very pretty, but I imagine obviously there's a cost to that.
There is. I would say all of those things, like more glass means more light. You know, again, that's a one-time upfront cost for a forever return. Things, the bump outs give the apartment some character. But you know, it was expensive, and I continue with each project to look for ways to sort of value engineer without providing a product of lesser quality. That's the best way to put it. So, you know, simple things I would say, like for example, an architect will do a reflected ceiling plan and drop a bunch of recessed lights in. And I come at it from a design background, so I understand those decisions. But I'm also now the developer, which is a very different role than the designer, because I have to pay for every one of those recessed lights. So my attitude is, I want to include recessed lights in the living room, but how many recessed lights do we need? Because if we can go from 8 to 4, you know, I've just cut that cost in half without necessarily reducing the experience in the space. And in your living room, you don't want to be blasted by light. So we don't necessarily need those lights. And it doesn't necessarily mean the architect is bad or malicious. It just, you know, we clicked a few lights here, and can we get away with less and still maintain the same experience? You know, one of the things we try to do is limit the amount of hallway space. You know, so the least amount of hallway that I can have, both in the apartment and the common areas. Because every square foot of common area I'm not getting rent for, I have to heat, I have to provide lighting, I have to clean it. So if I can do a single stair and have a small vestibule off that stair to 2 apartments as opposed to a hallway, you know, that makes a big difference. So, you know, it's decisions like that I would say are maintaining the living experience, but reducing the construction cost, for sure.
That makes sense. So you did the construction. Originally, your plan, I imagine 180, 200 square foot is what you were hoping for.
That's what I was expecting.
Right. It went up a little bit due to COVID and a lot of those types of things. But, you know, generally when you're using financing, you have to pay for the overruns, but you were still paying everything out of cash, right? There's no financing.
Yes.
And then project's complete. How was the lease up?
Leasing residential is no problem. I would say there is strong demand for good quality 1-bedroom apartments. One of the things we did in our buildings was geothermal, so our heat is included with the rent. We elected to include internet and electricity. Psychologically, I have found at that end of the market, tenants really like one check. So for the time being, we have been eating the cost of electricity and internet in our rents. And so far, we've been okay with it. It's a little tricky because when tenants are looking, you know, they may see, oh, your rent is X and another, but then you have to have an agent who's marketing it in a way to say, look, okay, have you added in your heating, your electric, your internet? Now factor all those on that other apartment, and we are very cost competitive, largely because our heat is geothermal, so there is no expense beyond a small running of the heat pump. So the heat pump might add $20 a month, $25 a month to your electric bill, but you have no heating bill.
That's good. That's true, right? So, and in their mind, well, heat costs $150 a month.
Exactly.
So they're putting $150 when it's really costing you $25. So
Correct.
in theory, you're making a margin there just on the heating by including it.
Correct.
And same with the internet, I imagine it's cheaper to do that for $50 a person.
Absolutely. I mean, I recommend Greenlight to anybody. Right now, you can get a bundle for Greenlight for a 1 gig on a multi-unit, 1 gig per apartment for $32 per unit versus what they're going to pay on their own.
Yep.
So I've done those things to try to value engineer this and make a good value, but we have not had a problem renting 1-bedroom apartments. That there's a real demand for good quality 1-bedrooms. Commercial right now is a lot tougher. And we have a small commercial space. It's 850 square feet, and it's at grade on Grant Street, so you have to find the right tenant. At the other building, we've had good luck. We've had an attorney for almost a decade. We've had a clothing store. We have a record shop. We have a physical therapist. But it takes time to find those people.
Right, and the good thing about commercial generally is when you do have them, they stay for a very long time. You get a very reasonable rent, and it actually makes a lot of sense. But the time it takes from start to leasing it up to that commercial tenant tends to take quite a while.
Correct. And I mean, it's a tough time to open a business right now. So the ground level at 386, we're still looking for a tenant. We have tenants at the 3 other commercial spaces we've had, and they've been long-term tenants. And I think if you're reasonable with them, they're reasonable with you. And we have 10-year leases. We have as little as 3 years. But usually if we get someone for 3 and they're happy, they're going to sign for a 5-year lease after that.
Makes perfect sense. So we got the building leased up, and this might be slightly out of order, but maybe just kind of check back tax credits or incentives. So sounds like the building is all electric, no gas.
Correct.
Use geothermal.
Correct. And geothermal, you get 100% depreciation in the year you install it. That's a federal thing. And so you get the accelerated depreciation, and you get tax credits for the solar. The geo is a home run from day one. It makes absolute sense on any new construction, geothermal. Solar, it's a so-so thing.
That's fair. So did you get tax credits or the incentives paid once you were completed with the project?
On 368 and 363, we received the 485A and the 485B from the City of Buffalo.
What is that?
It's a great program I want to advocate for strongly because I believe in it, and there's a lot of debate about it in the community. So essentially, the state established a program that allows municipalities to opt into, which is this 485A and 485B. And essentially, if you take an existing vacant building and you do substantial renovation, by that I mean $500,000 or more of renovation to bring that building back online, the City of Buffalo says essentially you pay no increase in your property taxes for the first 8 years, and then your property taxes are stepped up 20% per year over the next 4 or 5 years.
Till it's back to market.
Till you're back to market. So essentially, let's say you have a parcel that was appraised at $20,000. You put in $1 million. Now it's appraised. It may not appraise for $1 million. It may only appraise for, let's say, it appraises for $800,000 because that's the appraisal is based on your rental income and so on and so forth. So let's say the city now, the new appraised rate is $800,000. You essentially get a credit for $780,000 for the first 8 years, and then it's stepped up to the full value. So you get a substantial, you don't get your taxes increased for the first 8 to 12 years of the ownership. And that allows you to essentially get the building online, because the first few years you're not making very much money. You're barely breaking even on these buildings because you have so much capital invested, you're paying financing in many cases, and you're not getting a lot of rental income. So it takes a few years for essentially you to pay down debt, to have rents appreciate a little bit, and to get to a point where you're making money.
Yeah, and this 485 and 485B.
485B is for new construction.
Oh, it's for new construction. So same thing, but
same program, but less favorable for the new construction. Slightly less favorable terms.
Okay.
I think the perception in the community is that, it's a giveaway to developers. Here's what I would say: if I'm the City of Buffalo and I have a vacant parcel, I'm only getting $1,000 a year in tax revenue. I'm not giving up anything because I don't have it to begin with. What I'm saying is, by bringing in outside investors, having them make the capital investment on the property, we're not increasing their property taxes for a few years. So let's say one of my buildings lasts 100 years, which I expect they will. The city is foregoing 10 years of tax revenue to get 90 years of tax revenue. That's a great deal for the residents of the city of Buffalo. So for people to perceive this as a giveaway, as opposed to an incentive for developers, seems completely backwards to me. Now, do some people argue, well, developers were doing only one residential unit and way more commercial units, and okay, they were still making the capital investment, still building the building, and that building will still be here and can be redeveloped into multi-unit or anything else down the road. We still took a vacant parcel and made a capital investment in our city.
Yeah, and even in your cases, it was a city of Buffalo owned piece of land, which means they were getting $0.
Correct. Correct.
So you went from $0 to what it would be market, and then obviously worked your way up.
Yeah, so 386 now. Right now, actually, I should let me preface it. 363. Let's go back to the first new building. Okay, so we got the 45B on 363. Okay, the appraised. I want to say, and you could look this up. Anybody can. It's public record. The appraised value on 363 now, I think, is $1 million, let's say, that the city has it appraised at. So in a matter of time, we are going to pay taxes on what the city has evaluated to be $1 million property on Grant Street in the city of Buffalo, on what was a vacant parcel that they had appraised at $15,000.
Yep.
Yes, do we have to wait 8 years to get that tax revenue? Yes. Was it still a good deal? Yes, it is.
Yes.
Do I have to wait? Now, I'm a member of this development company. I'm not the capital partner, which means I have to wait. I have been working in this business for over a decade. I have not gotten a check yet myself, and I've worked for 10 years. That's the deal that I made. And I don't think it's an unfair deal for the residents of the city of Buffalo to essentially forego an increase in property taxes for a window of time to allow a property to get profitable.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense, and it gives a good incentive, especially with inflation and all these other things. It really hurts it now where it does get that incentive. I was not familiar with either of those.
Yes.
Quick question on the 485A and B. What, is it a credit or is it just a reduction in taxes every single year?
Well, this is how it works. So you build a new, right now I own a vacant parcel, right? City appraises at $15,000. I'm paying $1,000, let's say, a year in property taxes. Okay. I want to build a new building. The city of Buffalo is not going to tell me, this is what your property taxes are going to be. We can make an educated guess based on the revenue we're making and the comps in the neighborhood, approximately what we all think the taxes are going to be. But I don't know as a developer going in what my appraised value or my tax burden is going to be before the building is built. The city will not discuss that with you until the project is done. They know how many apartments you have, what your rent's going to be, and then their real estate office, or I'm sorry, maybe the property tax office, I may be wrong in what office, but they decide then what your assessed value is and what your appraised value is, and then what your taxes are going to be. So once they've determined that number, then they determine if you're eligible for the 45A and the 45B. Now, we have applied for the 45B on 386 Grant Street. We have not heard back from the city. I have still waiting to hear if we are going to be accepted on this next project. Part of it has to do with, there was an election, there's a change of administration, there's a change of people in City Hall. So I don't know the answer to that question yet.
And you apply after it's done.
Yes.
So you have no leverage.
We have no leverage. We have no leverage. I'm hoping that the mayor's office recognizes the value in this program.
Right, and it gives the incentive for you to do it again.
Absolutely. I'm 46 years old. I'm hoping I don't keel over. I'd like to do more projects. I'd like to do more buildings on Grant Street. I can't go to my capital partner and propose a building that will lose money. I have to propose. That's the criteria for my investor. Did the last building lose money or make money? Because if it lost money, there are no future buildings. So I have to make money on each building. So I'm hoping that the city sees the merit in that, particularly in the difficult development environment that we're in terms of construction costs. It has not gotten easier. And we are already seeing, and we will continue to see, a slowdown in construction in the city of Buffalo. It's just a reality. So.
No, we certainly have. Go hit most of these here.
Yeah.
So a couple questions for you. So, I'm a newer developer. I'm actually developing 2 schools right now. My question is, as a newer developer, what's something that they consistently underestimate? What's something that they go in, they don't realize, they don't think about going into development, whether it is new build or a rehab type project?
So this is a substantial rehab you're involved in.
So I'm doing a substantial one. It doesn't even specifically about that, but if someone wants to be a developer, maybe they've done a lot of 4 units and multis.
Sure.
They've kind of played that game, but they want to now develop. They want to go into those bigger projects.
If you are doing a substantial gut rehab or new construction, hire a competent architect. There may be a $20,000 difference between a incompetent architect and a competent architect in terms of their fees. That you will lose that $20,000 on one change order, not even at one change order on the back end. When you break ground, the only thing protecting you as the developer are those construction documents. From change orders, you don't have a lot of leverage. What are you going to say to the general contractor? Okay, you can stop working right now, and now I'll make no money. I have dollars invested in this hole in the ground that's producing no income. So the only leverage you have are those construction documents, the quality of the documents and the quality of the contracts that you have. We use AIA contracts, period. They're fair for the contractor, they're fair for the architect, they're fair for the owner.
Yep.
And they are put together by the American Institute of Architects, who understand every which way a project can go south and how to mediate in those circumstances. But if you have good quality documents, you're going to reduce the number of change orders you have, and you're going to reduce the overall cost of the project. Poor quality documents leave a lot of room for the general contractor to say, well, that was not in the drawing, or this wasn't specified. And you're going to get hit again and again and again.
And then when you're doing these projects, are you hiring a GC or are you the GC?
We hired a GC. On all 3 projects, we use the same GC BRD. So we work with them on the first one, and we worked on the second and the third.
And how were the proposed costs to the actual cost in the end?
We used an AIA contract, a cost with a not to exceed. So essentially, they came in and basically said they were involved from the beginning. So actually, even while we were designing, they were in the meetings with the architect. So they would say, that's not a great idea. Architects are wonderful, but sometimes you need a contractor in the room to say, look, that small move you just made is going to cost us a lot of money down the road. So they were helpful in value engineering before we got too far down the road. And so they kept the architect on a track that was efficient. And then when they bid the project, they said, look, we essentially will be paid 8% on top of the subs, and we are giving you a not to exceed number. So we had a max price, but they were negotiating with multiple subs over the process. So if they could get a cheaper number, they were. So we had a not to exceed number that we knew we were not going to go over. And then during that process, they were looking for subcontractors that were cheaper. So BRD does some of the work in-house, but most of it they had subcontractors for. So the masonry, plumbing, HVAC were all subs.
Yeah, and then one final one. When you finish with the project, most would then do a cash-out refinance in your situation. Sounds like you did not do that, right?
No, we did not.
Why not do a cash-out refi, replenish the capital partner to have the capital be used elsewhere? Because
this is a portion of a larger portfolio for him. So for him, this is a piece of a larger pie. More debt is more risk.
True.
Does not want that risk in his life. So is comfortable with a smaller portfolio with less risk. And is willing to build incrementally over time without the banks. And again, the financing terms for a lot of the banks are not that great. So we just felt like we were not getting great terms. We're not big enough yet to get good enough terms. It wasn't worth it.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming down. Absolutely. This is absolutely amazing. Learned a lot more about you and Grant Street. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.